now to major developments this morning in our fight against COVID and the Omicron variant. Jane Holton is the chair of the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and she joins us now from Canberra. Jane, good morning to you. Can we begin with the outbreak affecting Sydney? Two major clusters at this stage. Has the horse bolted with Omicron?
Well, I think Omicron's here, we know that, and we know it's highly, highly infectious. So, yes, we expect probably Omicron will replace Delta as the dominant variant, and it's arrived, and we're now seeing it spreading, not just in Sydney, but elsewhere. So, yes, I think the horse has bolted.
We also have cases in Melbourne, Brisbane recording a world first variation of Omicron. If that's true, what does that mean?
So what happens with this virus is it continues to mutate, and there are thousands of variants that we're seeing right around the world, and we're creating a big scientific information base. We know that not all of those variants are variants of concern, but clearly something which is associated with Omicron is something we'll watch quite carefully. So good on the scientists in Queensland who've identified this variant. It has different mutations, particularly on the spike protein. It's not something particularly that we should worry about right now, but obviously people will keep an eye on it.
There are some hopeful assessments coming from the World Health Organization this morning. What does the latest data tell us about the severity of the Omicron variant?
You're right. What we're looking at now is early evidence about whether this particular variant brings with it severe disease and death. And it's still very early, so we all need to remember we don't have a lot of data yet, but it certainly doesn't look like this is going to cause lots of severe disease and death. That's great if it's true, but it's still early days. WHO is optimistic, so I think we should all be optimistic.
Okay, tell us if you can about these early indications that Pfizer may be up to 40 times less effective against Omicron, but with a third dose, it's sufficient?
Yeah, so again, we have early data. There's one study that's just been published, or in the process of being published, that looks at how effective particularly the Pfizer vaccine is after 2 doses in respect of the Omicron variant. And what it's suggesting is that we might see a reduced efficacy when it comes to preventing infection. Now, that doesn't mean that it isn't going to give us protection against illness or death, and we're hopeful that we're still going to get that protection, but it's still early days. Now, the other thing we've seen is evidence, or the beginnings of evidence, that actually if you have your third dose, that booster dose, that is going to significantly improve your protection against this variant. So yesterday we heard a lot of our health ministers out saying, go out and get your variant, go out and get your variant, go out and get your variant. You can your vaccine, your booster vaccine, if you've had your 2 shots, or your vaccine, and you can tell whether your 6 months is up by looking at your vaccine certificate. It'll tell you the date of your second shot, and then you can figure out when the third dose, your booster, is due.
Should we be bringing that forward to 5 months after your second shot, or are you still satisfied that 6 months is sufficient?
Again, we don't really have quite enough evidence yet. So actually, the government has asked ATAGI, we all know how important they've been through the pandemic, to have a look at this. And so far they've said not enough evidence, but there's no doubt in my mind that they'll be watching this really closely. If there is sufficient evidence that we should bring forward that booster, there's no doubt in my mind that that's what they'll say. Right this minute, they're saying let's stick with 6 months. So again, as soon as your booster is due, and we've already seen hundreds of thousands of people go and have their booster, that's great. But if your booster's due, go and get it. If you haven't been fully vaccinated yet, please make sure that you get fully vaccinated, because that is better than not being vaccinated.
Okay, Jane.
Wait a minute. Who are you?
We know, and we know this from what happened with H1N1, that if you can stop something early in terms of everything from ring fencing in particular countries, but also to look at the transmission from country to country, and there's a variety of measures that can be taken to do that. But unless that is done in a global context and it's done very early, we will end up with a situation where the entire supply chain will have gone. So what we need to do at the very outset is figure out what the likely route of transmission is and move very quickly to secure supplies and distribute supplies according to whatever epidemiological protocol and based on what Steve says, as we know, we already know some things about the transmission of this disease. But unless we do that whilst doing what we can do on vaccine, I agree, we will have this get out of control.
Okay.
Wow.